The brothers of a rowdy fraternity drink, party, and try to not get expelled. Special guests Rich Noah and Paul Brief, our dads, join us to chat about John Belushi's eyebrows, a freeze-frame heart attack, and getting an A in lobotomy. Fat, Drunk, and Stupid is no way to find out if Animal House stands the test of time.
Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? James says Gladiator with the glutton. Alan says as a father, blah blah. It's the test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very, very special episode of The Test of Time. My name is Alan Noah. We've got two very special guests, but first, of course, is my co-host, as always, James Brief.
How are you? And in addition to our special guests, we have an even special surprise for even you, Al, coming up. We are going to be talking with a member of the Animal House cinematic universe. But why don't we talk about our special guest first, Al?
Yeah, so it's Father's Day, and our dads are here. I'm joined by my dad, Rich Noah.
Hello.
And James, you're there with your dad.
That's right. I want to introduce my father, Dr. L. Paul Brief.
Hi, everybody.
Hello, welcome. Hi. This is so very exciting. It's always exciting. Every episode is a special episode. Every guest is a special guest. But we have been talking about doing this episode. I looked it up, James, for 6 years. 6 years. And I want to tell this story because I think it's very funny. Back in 2018, our friend Mike Kahn was emailing us about coming on the podcast for the first time. And he's in our fraternity. And so he said, hey, can I come on to talk about Animal House? And I was replying to his email and I said, Mike, I think that's a great idea, but no, I want to save that movie for my dad. And while I was typing that email, there was a little yellow notification and there was a new email from James. And James, you said the exact same thing. No, we're going to save Animal House for my dad, meaning you, Paul. And I was like, okay, we clearly have to do this with both of our dads. It took us many, many years to coordinate this. But I'm really, really thrilled that we're finally able to have this conversation. And also, James, you and I, we have a commonality in our history. There's movies that you grew up watching, that I grew up watching, and we knew about our love of Back to the Future and Star Wars and Indiana Jones and all of those things. But I didn't know that about you, that you had a special relationship with Animal House with your dad. So where did that come from? How did you guys get into this movie?
It was on VHS. It was one of those VHS tapes that we had. And it was, I guess, since our parents grew up with, we had grown up with as well. How about you, Al? When did you first see this film?
Well, I was watching this movie all the time with my dad. Paul, when did you first encounter Animal House?
I guess we saw it in 1980. It came out in 78. Mm. So we saw it a couple of years later. And it was love at first sight. I loved this movie. You know, it was very much my college career, although I didn't have the money to join a fraternity. I went to Vietnam, and Vietnam is mentioned in the movie more than once. It just clicked, you know. A few times in your life, people ask you, what's your favorite movie? My answer is always the same. My second favorite movie is The Ten Commandments.
Okay.
Next question is, what's your favorite? Animal House. So, you know, everybody cracks up with it. Animal House came in second to Ten Commandments, you know. But it's true. It's just my favorite movie. I think I must have seen it 20 times.
Wow.
It never ages. It's always young, you know. And I always crack up. I'm always laughing every 2 minutes. You know, it's great.
Rich, what about you? When did you first see it?
Okay, so I first saw it when it came out. I was hooked. I loved it. I love Belushi, Matheson, all the characters. I thought that the acting was really good. And a little bit of trivia, very little. I lived in California for a while, and I also would travel to Oregon And that's where most of the film was done in Oregon, in Eugene, Oregon. And I had occasion to go there once to see some clients. And the downtown area is exactly the way they showed it in the end of the movie, the parade. That's Eugene, Oregon. It's just fascinating. And that's my connection.
You weren't in a fraternity either, right?
No.
So it wasn't a movie where you could relate to the experiences necessarily. It was just something funny.
It was very funny, very well written. And Belushi, I thought, stole the show. Two scenes in particular that are etched in my mind forever is the cafeteria when he's walking with a tray of food, stuffing his pocket, his mouth, every place he could put food in. And I don't know how much of that was ad-lib, but I think it seemed like it was probably scripted, but very, very funny. And then when he sat down with the other people and the young woman says, "That boy is a pig pig." And then he stuffs a hard-boiled egg in his mouth and says, "Guess what I am now?" And splatters the egg everywhere.
It was mashed potato.
Oh, see,
okay.
I was thinking that. I was like, oh, was it an egg? I always kind of thought maybe it was marshmallows.
It was a side dish to a hamburger. So it was either French fries or mashed potatoes, and that was it. And when he bashes his cheeks, it flies out like mashed potatoes.
That's great.
You know.
So, Rich, you had seen it in the theater, and Dad, you saw it a couple years later. What is the draw of a movie back then? Because it's obviously not a classic when it comes out. Is it because it's a John Belushi film, or is it because you heard that this is funny?
I think for me, both. I always liked John Belushi back from the Saturday Night Live days. And Harold Ramis.
Yep.
I don't know whether he was a producer or a director, but he also was someone who I liked and admired very much. And it sounded like a very fun, funny, male-oriented, coming-of-age college movie.
Harold Ramis was one of the writers, and he wanted to direct it. The studio didn't have faith in him, so they gave it to John Landis because he was coming off of Kentucky Fried Movie, so he had a little bit more experience. Just a quick sidebar. Did you see this in the theater with Mom? If it was 78?
You know, I don't remember if she was with me.
Okay.
I don't remember. We'll have to ask her.
Okay. Neither here nor there. I was
But
just
when I
curious.
put it up, when it's on TV now, Molly walks out of her room. She's okay. Go and enjoy it. It's not her thing.
Well, I mean, Molly, your wife, my stepmom, she must have seen this movie with you infinity times.
Oh yeah.
John Belushi, unfortunately, passed away. Classic Hollywood rise, cocaine overdose. Someone like John Belushi, the name alone could sell a movie. Starring The Rock, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, starring John Belushi. It's known as a John Belushi film still 45 years later. He follows up with Blues Brothers. He's in 1941 with Steven Spielberg. But he definitely actually had some acting ability in him.
I remember one serious role at least. The Great Divide is a movie about a young man and a woman in a cabin in the forests of Colorado. It was very good. SNL started in 1975. In 1978, he was not yet a superstar, so this movie really made him a superstar.
I agree. It propelled him. Absolutely.
It propelled him through the stratosphere. But there was one famous actor in that movie, Sutherland. And
Sutherland,
apparently
yes.
Sutherland made the worst financial decision of his life when they offered him 5% of the gross or whatever forever. And he said, no, I want to get paid. So they paid him $50,000. And 5% would have been maybe $1 billion by now. So I think it was a very, very bad career choice. He was the only known big star, and Belushi became a big star with this.
Right.
Yeah. And Belushi was actually sober while they were making this movie. I didn't realize that. They kind of very deliberately kept him away from the other cast members who were partying and were going to frat parties and drinking. And he was separate. He was in a different hotel with his wife. And, that scene where he chugs the bottle of Jack, it's just iced tea. It's still impressive that he's able to drink that much liquid in that short of a time, whether it's alcohol or not. It's still an impressive feat. But yeah, he was apparently sober when they were making this movie.
Interesting.
Which is a sharp contrast. And whether or not this is a famous Hollywood urban legend or not, The legend is that on the budget of Blues Brothers, there was a cocaine budget. I mean, this was 1981 or something, and like there were just hundreds of thousands of dollars of cocaine on set. You know, when the cameras were rolling, he was able to do it, but eventually, I guess, his heart couldn't. But it's interesting that he was totally sober because he plays a perfect drunk in this film.
Yeah. He does.
The other interesting thing I found about Belushi in reading a lot of reviews yesterday is that everybody comments that in spite of his brilliance, he didn't speak much. He had very few lines, Did we quit when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor? That holy shit, I'm sorry, stuff like that. But he doesn't really speak much. And the whole scene with the pillow fight, where he moves his ladder across the window to see Babs, he doesn't say one word.
His eyebrows do a lot of talking.
Yes, his eyebrows are the real stars.
Oh, the
of the
eyebrows
show.
going up and down,
Right?
one at a time was just amazing. Who can do that?
My daughter watched that movie with me several years ago, and she thought that was the best part, moving the eyebrows. So,
Yeah.
There's several scenes like that. There's a part where Flounder, he's completely depressed because his brother's beloved car has been destroyed. And Bluto, John Belushi, he goes up and it's a completely silent scene. He does like a funny face to him, sort of like a dad in front of as an
beer
infant.
can.
Then he tries crushing a beer can on his head.
And he smashes a beer bottle, too.
Smashes a beer bottle as well, and none of those things make Flounder happy, and also none of those things involve Belushi saying a single word. It's all physical comedy. This is a movie that our fathers know backwards and forwards, but if people haven't seen this film, do you want to tell them about the plot of Animal House?
Sure, I would love to. So this movie is about the members of the Delta House at a fictional Faber college. There's House President Hoover, who's trying to keep things together. Then there's Otter, who's always looking for his next girl. Boone loves his girlfriend Katie, but she's sick of his immature antics. Pledges Pinto and Flounder are eager to join the frat and get laid. D-Day is a mystery, and Bluto wants nothing more than to party. Unfortunately, Dean Wormer hates the Deltas and will stop at nothing to expel them. He enlists Greg Marmalard and Doug Niedermeyer from the Preppy Omega fraternity next door to help. Can the lovable Deltas figure out a way to stay on campus? So, James, I don't need to ask you if this was a hit when it came out, because this was a huge smash. It was the most successful comedy of all time until Ghostbusters a few years later, right?
I don't know. That sounds absolutely accurate. This was actually the number 2 film of 1978. Number 1 is a film that we have not gone over. Perhaps maybe one year at Valentine's Day we'll do this one. That's a hint. It's a musical. Takes place in the 50s. Grease. Yeah, Grease was number 1. And National Lampoon's Animal House, the full title of this movie, was number 2. Superman being number 3. This film was a smash hit. And this film was made on a shoestring budget, $3 million budget. And you can tell it opened at number 1 on July 28th, 1978. Actually, number 1 with only $276,000. But I think this is the kind of film that would slowly build up. But in 1978 alone, this movie made, I've seen anywhere between $120 and $141 million domestically. And the 1979 release, that made another $20 million. Watching this, I was watching this with someone who hadn't seen, a buddy of mine from high school, hadn't seen this film in years, but we were pointing out, he's still working. Yeah, this guy's always in stuff. He's been in stuff for years. And, it's amazing how many careers this film launched.
I would say the biggest career this film launched, besides Belushi, who died very soon afterwards, biggest career was obviously Kevin Bacon.
I heard that Kevin Bacon, he was interviewed, and they told him, you're going to be in this movie, talk about Animal House, we're going to pay you scale. And he didn't know what that meant. He said, they're going to give me a scale? He was a waiter in New York at the time. So that really launched his career.
That's really funny.
Second biggest, I think, even who's a character actor, D-Day.
D-Day, certainly.
Bruce McGill, he's been in dozens of movies.
Absolutely.
And he's
cousin
never
Vinny.
The star. He's never an attractive sexual interest guy, but he's always in a lot of movies. and he's a very decent actor. He's a character
Yeah,
actor.
he is.
Also, Karen Allen.
I don't think she was ever a superstar, was she?
Fair.
Another person, Tim Matheson. He was the vice president on The West Wing.
Tom Hulce did Amadeus.
Right.
That was a big role.
And Dad, obviously, you know this story, but many, many, many years ago, I wanted to get you something for Father's Day, and I wasn't sure what to get you. And I figured, I'll get you Animal House on VHS. I think this was early 90s. And I went to my local Sam Goody at the mall, and they didn't have a copy of Animal House on VHS. So I had to special order it. And when it came in, it was a copy that had Spanish subtitles.
I remember that now.
Right?
When I got that Father's Day, it's interesting Spanish subtitles on Animal House. Now I know why.
Yes, because the guy who worked at Sam Goody, who was probably, 16 years old, just pushed the wrong button in the computer. And, I got it right before we were coming out to California to see you or something. So I didn't have time to return it and get a new one special ordered. So that was the one that I gave you. That was the one that we watched over and over and over again. And the joke I used to make was, before that you had Animal House memorized, but then because of that VHS, you also had it memorized in Spanish.
Almost.
Almost. Fine. The subtitles were there. It's not like a DVD or streaming where you can turn it off or change the language. They were burned in. And do you remember what the movie was called in Spanish? The title?
Colegio de Animales.
Yeah, Colegio de
Wow,
Animales.
that's scary.
Well, we watched it a million times.
Yeah.
There's definitely certain parts where when I was watching the movie the other day, not only am I remembering what the line is, but I'm also remembering the Spanish translation at the very end during the parade when the playmate goes into the teenager's window, like the little kid's window, and he says, "Thank you, God," and in Spanish it's "Gracias, Señor." It's just, it's funny to me to think of it as funny in Spanish too.
It is not exactly a literal translation, but close enough.
Exactly.
I have to put this film in context. The film came out in 1978. It takes place in 1962. Right. And I think the reason that this film takes place in 1962 is because it's usually pretty well established that the quote-unquote the 60s starts with pretty much the counterculture, and that's the assassination of John F. Kennedy, and that takes place in November 1963. The real quote-unquote the antagonist, that's the Omegas,
the Omega House.
The Omega House. They are really the embodiment, in my opinion, of this 1950s. You could tell in the beginning, very stiff culture, and what's clear, some of the undertones, they do not want different looking people. They want very well-bred Christian American white males in there.
Probably not crazy about blacks or Jews.
Exactly. Jagdish and Mohammed are literally shoved into the corner with the blind people, the Jewish guys, what Omega House is definitely saying are the unattractive, both physically and, aren't the right stuff for Omega House.
Right. And as you're kind of talking about, the 60s and counterculture and everything, the whole military aspect of it, I always thought was a little bit confusing, because when we were in college, there were the ROTC people and they did all of the army stuff. But if you weren't in ROTC, you didn't have to do any of that. But in this movie, you have Pinto and Flounder, who don't seem to be in the ROTC side of things, but they're still freshmen, so they have to do some kind of military training, some military exercises. Was that what it was like in the 60s?
I think they kind of exaggerated that.
It was not an obligation. I was in college with a lot of our ROTC guys. I wasn't in college in the 50s, and there was no obligation at all. The ROTC guys were the people who wanted to go in the military.
Right.
The draft was on.
Sure.
But ROTC allowed you to go in as an officer. That was the advantage of ROTC.
There's a part when the boys are all expelled from Faber College, and Dean Wormer says something very, with a grin on his face, and he goes, "And I'd like you all to know that I've alerted your local draft boards that you are now all eligible for military service, because before the escalation of the war, by these guys in college were they weren't recruited as much as the people that were not in college." But Dean Wormer's basically saying, yeah, not only you kicked out of Faber College, but you boys are going to Vietnam.
Well, that was a bit of an anachronism, because when the movie came out in '78, this was post-Vietnam, but it was very obvious in the '60s and early '70s that the draft was very important. If you got drafted, you went to Vietnam.
That's right.
So even though this in the movie was '62, everybody was fully aware of what Dean Wormer was saying.
You're going to Vietnam.
I'd like to develop something that I just realized with the last time I watched this movie, with the horse scene. I'm sure you'll agree when you hear this, because it's quite shocking. Now, the horse scene is in the football field, and the ROTCs are doing jumping jacks, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and then he rides up in his horse, Niedermeyer. He gets off the horse, and he says to some miscellaneous kid, "Take my mount." He walks up to Flounder, and I was absolutely shocked by this. Did you guys realize what his uniform looked like?
No, what does it say?
Wait, just that it was so tight?
No. Have you seen the movie Patton?
No.
Yes, I have.
The opening scene of Patton, it's unbelievable, guys. He's wearing a shiny metal helmet, a green jacket, jodhpurs, the bulgy pants like the Nazis wore, and riding boots. That is exactly the uniform they put on Niedermeyer.
Really?
I never thought about that, but that's true.
You remember that, Rich?
I do remember. Now that we're talking about it.
He was such a gung-ho. He was like a general, Niedermeyer.
Yeah, he was.
They absolutely knocked off General Patton's uniform. We were watching the movie with my wife yesterday. I said, "Rochelle, this is Patton's outfit."
That's really funny. And that part of the movie also leads to the infamous line, "A pledge pin on your uniform." When I was pledging, every single time you and I talked on the phone, Dad, you would ask me if I was wearing a pledge pin.
Yes, I was. Yes, I did.
And you would give me that line.
And many years later, your cousin Danny was always bringing up to me, asking me if I'm wearing my pledge pin. So he also was a part of that. And it's just something that you and I kid around about all the time. Is that a pledge pin on your uniform? And the way he did it in the movie, Niedermeyer, I mean, just right up to Flounder's face.
Yeah.
And practically spitting into his face.
Right.
Just one of the classic lines, classic scenes. That and cleaning up the horse crap in the stable. You report to the stables in 1700 hours. Oh, well, I've got a pledge pin.
And well, let's talk about that horse too, because I remember thinking, even back in the 90s when we were watching this movie on VHS with the Spanish subtitles, when the horse dies of a heart attack, even way back then, that bothered me. Just like the way that it's the freeze frame, and I get it, it was a very low budget movie. It just kind of looks bad when, they just kind of stop the horse footage. They cut away and there's a sound effect of him falling down.
With that look on the horse's face when he shot Flounder shot the gun into the air. I mean, I can't emulate what the horse, how they made the horse look, but it was hysterical. I thought it was very funny.
Oh, no, it's very, very funny. I'm just saying that it's the kind of thing that in a more modern movie, it would be a CGI horse, and you would see the horse collapse and fall over, and they couldn't do that in 1978 in a movie with a $3 million budget. All they could do was a freeze frame, and it's fine. It's totally fine.
I 100% agree with you, Al, and I used to think the same thing as a kid. I didn't quite get what was going on, actually, as a kid. I didn't know that it was a heart attack.
When they're leading the horse into Dean Wormer's office, from a test of time perspective, I was like, this prank would not work at all today, just because college campuses or anywhere in the world, There's cameras. They would be seen, they would be instantly identified whether they kill the horse, whether they don't kill the horse, whether they bring the horse in and then take him right out. They're going to instantly know it was D-Day and Bluto.
1962, no cameras.
And that's
Sure.
exactly what it is. Yeah. Even in 1978, when they write this film, there's no cameras.
No cameras.
Right.
You know, Al, you've mentioned it, but we were in a fraternity together. You know, when we went to the college, that was when the internet was just starting. But because there's no internet in the 80s and most of the 90s, movies are the only thing that kind of guides people in what you're supposed to do when you go to college. But I think things like pledge pins and, you know, ceremonies and even whacking people on the butt with a paddle, toga parties, which is a scene I want to talk about. Of course, they were probably done in the 50s and 60s, but in my mind, people were basing a lot of 90s fraternities stuff on Animal House.
Apparently in the early 60s, toga parties were very popular on college campuses. Then they kind of fell out of fashion for whatever reason. And then this movie came out, and then toga parties became a big thing again. And we never had a toga party at AE Pi. My roommate Clint and I threw a party in our apartment one year, and the joke was that we told every group of friends it was going to be a different kind of party. We told some people it was a Hawaiian party, we told some people it was a crazy hat party, and some people it was a costume party. And then when they showed up to the apartment, myself and my roommate, we were in togas. So it wasn't really like a official toga party, but you know, that was our...
People showed up with Hawaiian leis and
Yes.
things like that. That's very funny.
Yes.
You never told me about that.
Oh, really? Oh,
A lot of things about college you didn't tell me about, but that's for another time.
Well, fair. But yeah, that was the closest we ever came to a toga party. It was fun walking around in the togas.
And I know exactly why toga parties, and I think I know why they went out of fashion, like you were wondering. Apparently, fraternities and the Greek culture, they were not seen as the party people at the Delta House. They were seen more as the Omega House. Like, these were very establishment. Your father was in it, and your father's father was in it, so you're in this house. And in the early 70s, late 60s, the counterculture was like, the hell with it. I'm not interested in doing fraternities if you like fraternities. And this film apparently made Greek life quite popular again. And that kind of goes along with that when you were in college. Like, it was popular. It wasn't as popular, and it was kind of seen as people were rebelling against it until Animal House came out and showed how much more fun the Delta House aspect of it
Right,
could be.
but it should be said that the formality and the stiffness of the Omega type houses never disappeared. They still have these houses in college. Some of them are 100% Catholic, and the others are 100% prep school kids, and they're still around, and they're still very formal, and they have these debutante balls where everybody wears black tie, and of course there's the Delta House, which apparently was a copy of a Dartmouth fraternity. That still exists. And the opposite, very formal, still also exists.
Oh, absolutely. I went on a formal tour in college at one of these houses. And, you know, my last name, Brief, you can't quite tell, what I am. But I was with a friend, last name Weisberg, and another guy, he's Thai, as in like from Thailand. And this particular house, they were not paying any attention to those two. And they were directly asking me on the tour, like, this is during Rush Week, Al, what my father did for a living. I mean, these were real houses. This is at Cornell. Right. You probably know which houses I'm talking about, Al.
Sure.
Definitely classist fraternities absolutely exist still to this day.
In early drafts of the script for this movie, there were no Omegas and Deltas. There weren't good guys and bad guys. It was just gross fraternity guys. Apparently there were a lot of rape jokes and a lot of vomit jokes. I was reading that they were just projectile vomiting all over each other.
I remember my good friend Rich Nastasi, who you know very well.
Sure.
It was at a state teachers college in Oswego. And I visited him at one point, and he lived in a fraternity house. And in the morning I got up and I said, okay, I want to shower, whatever. He said, shower? Open the window, get some snow, and wipe your hands. I mean, it was just crazy back then. But he ended up in a place like that too. Now, of course, he was physics teacher of the year in Syracuse, New York, and high school track coach of the year, and upstanding citizen.
Well, sure. I mean, you can join one of these kinds of fraternities and, turn out fine. James and I are prime examples of that. But also, I mean, our fraternity was not Animal House. I mean, the stuff that happened in our day was incredibly tame. All jokes aside about things I never told you from college. I mean, I could tell you some stories, but nothing of the caliber of what you see in Animal House. I mean, I was even thinking about that the other day of like, oh, can I tell like some crazy stories from when James and I were in college? And they're all really tame, right? I mean, is there anything you can think of, James, that's like a crazy kind of Animal House-esque thing that we did?
Well, there are great fraternity stories, but the easiest way I always explain to people about what happened in our fraternity is there were absolutely no alcohol-based things that were done, and there was nothing illegal. So there was none of the shoplifting pranks, and none of the how much can you drink, or every time you get a question wrong, you drink. None of that stuff.
There was no real hazing?
No, there was hazing, but it was definitely nothing bad they did, nothing even approaching this level. But that there's something in the toga party scene that I love. The guy is singing, I gave my love a cherry that had no stone, and there's like four girls like they're completely swooning. And John Belushi, another silent scene, pretty much. He rolls his eyebrows, then he takes the guitar and smashes it, and then he just goes, sorry. It's such a funny scene. Of course it's mean, and it's terrible to do that. It's the guy's property. It's very funny because Bluto can't stand that stuff.
That singer is Stephen Bishop.
Yes.
He's a well-known singer. Probably his best-known song is On and On. Probably, right? But he also sings the Animal House theme song at the very end that like plays over the ending credits. Animal House.
I didn't know that.
House. Yeah, and of all of the songs on the soundtrack, that's the worst one. I think I kind of hate that song. It's really, really cheesy.
I love that song. We love that song.
The lyrics are so bad. I think at one point they even say that Mrs. Wormer is the queen of the Animal House. It's like, no, she's not. What are you talking about? That's a bad song. But everything else on the soundtrack is phenomenal. Maybe not Hey Paula. That's a pretty cheesy song.
It was Elmer Bernstein.
Yes.
Yes.
And he composed the score as if it were serious. He didn't know how to do a score for a comedy. And I think it was John Landis who told him, just play it straight. Imagine this is very academia and serious. And that's the theme that he came up with. And that does work.
It works.
Yeah.
We are going to get to it anyway. Certainly, if you were remaking this film today, there are scenes that you'd probably put word for word the same thing, but there are definitely things you would not write in this film. There's a part where Pinto, he's one of the pledges. He's fooling around with this girl, and at first you think the whole joke is that she's the mayor's daughter, and it's like, oh, you're messing with the mayor's daughter, and the guy maybe has connections to organized crime. That's kind of the joke, that Pinto is like the sweetest, innocent one of this whole group. He's a virgin. That's his big confession. And then she says, I'm 13. And it's like, oh, God. Oh, that's so horrible.
But Sarah Holcomb, I believe her name is.
Yeah.
The only other movie I remembered her being, and then she kind of disappeared, was in Caddyshack.
Yep.
And she had an Irish brogue.
Yes. A very thick Irish accent, yeah.
Very thick Irish accent in that movie.
In this movie's defense, she says that she's 13, and then the scene cuts away. So we don't know for sure that they do, in fact, have sex.
At the end, she says, Mom, Dad, this is the boy who molested me.
But she says molested me last month. So that was at the toga party. And then the quote-unquote inappropriate moment from that scene is she passes out, and then he's thinking about what to do. And the thing I would normally say is, well, you shouldn't make a joke about raping her or whatever. But in that scene's defense, there's the devil on his shoulder telling him to take advantage of her, and then the angel telling him not to, and he listens to the angel. He knows it's the wrong thing to do, and he doesn't do it. And if you're going to make a joke about rape, I feel like this is probably the better way to do it, where the character realizes what's the right thing to do and makes the right choice. And he's lovable Pinto. He's not going to do anything horrible.
He's a good guy.
He's a good kid. He knows what to do and what not to do. We love Pinto.
I have a question about the toga party. As
Yeah.
you know, they a little bit louder now, a little bit louder now, a little bit softer now. And at one point, Bluto says something, and everybody falls on their back, and they have like a seizure. They have convulsions.
Yeah.
What did he say?
I was always wondering that too, Paul. And when I watched it the other day, I specifically turned the captions on just for that moment. He says gator. He screams it, gator! I guess they're doing an alligator kind of thing, maybe?
When we were in a fraternity pledging, if the brothers came in and yelled a word, we would have to do something. I feel like this was a thing. They didn't explain it, and they never do. And also, It's not quite clear what Bluto's saying when he says gator.
No, I didn't
but
hear
whatever he says, everyone gets on the ground and starts acting maybe like an alligator or whatever it is, and they're doing some kind of dance. There even is, in the song that my dad and I like, that you don't, the Animal House closing credits song, there's a part in there where they go, do the Bluto, dun, 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 dun. And there's some kind of dance called Do the Bluto.
The last line in that song is, and baby, if you do the Bluto, you will get an A in lobotomy. You remember that?
No.
I just heard it yesterday. And baby, if you do the Bluto, you will get an A in lobotomy. Do the Bluto. And that's right near the end of the song. And get an A in lobotomy. Imagine that. Isn't that great?
Wow.
Right. That popular college course that everyone takes, lobotomy.
Right.
That scene when they're doing that dance, it did occur to me watching it the other day that it does feel a little small. That scene is supposed to be the ultimate party. This is the party that gets them kicked off campus. Otis Day and the Knights are there performing, and it's just like a handful of people, maybe a couple dozen in a basement. And I think I was thinking of old school when they have the big party and they have Snoop Dogg playing and there's hundreds of extras. And again, this was a movie made on a shoestring budget. They couldn't afford all of that. But it did just kind of make me think that, this ultimate party scene from the ultimate party, it wasn't really that big.
True.
When my brother went to college, when I was only in eighth grade, he joined ZBT at Cornell. And that basement is very small. I don't know if you remember it, Dad. I always, when I watched that scene, I always thought, oh, this looks exactly like my brother's fraternity. To me, it did look realistic.
I want to ask you about a different scene, Dad, because you've seen this movie a million times. Right. So I want to get your perspective on it. What exactly is Otter doing with the whole Fran Lebowitz thing? So Otter's pretending to be Fran Lebowitz's boyfriend / fiance. We're engaged to be engaged.
Or at least a date.
Right. He reads the obituary and he's like, oh, what's her name again? Fran Lebowitz. Okay. Is the boyfriend named in that obituary and he is assuming the role of the boyfriend who he's reading about? No. It's just made up.
Boyfriend was never named.
Okay, so it's pure imagination.
Absolutely.
Okay,
Absolutely.
Well, isn't that a huge roll of the dice that he's going to be able to get away with all of that?
Well, of course. When Otter turns around and says, I really don't want to be alone tonight or something like that. Oh, can you get some other dates for my friends? Because the other guys were out in the car waiting for him.
Right.
So she got a bunch of girlfriends to go with them.
But he's assuming that Fran never mentioned a boyfriend or that she did have a boyfriend named Bill who went to some other school or something. I mean, there's a lot of unknowns that have to fall into place in order for this plan to work.
This is 1962. If anything, her boyfriend in Maine or whatever other college, if anything, there's a love letter. Or maybe there's one phone down the hallway that everyone uses. But when Otter's making out with her in the car later, he's like, oh, Fawn used to touch me this way. And she goes, I know, she told me.
She plays along.
Yeah,
right.
she's either making it up, but just because she says at the time because she wants to sound appropriate. Or
that line
maybe
didn't make any
Fawn
sense.
had a bunch of boyfriends. And, who cares? It was just something that
really.
this is one of those guys she can't remember. There's no way they're going to say, I never heard about my dead roommate's boyfriend at this college, so you are totally a liar. He's a con artist here. That's what he's doing.
Yeah.
He is. I guess I just feel like he's such a good-looking guy. Why not just go to an Emily Dickinson college, hang out, and charm some gals? Like, he could have done that. It would have been easier.
Yeah, that's true. But it would not have gone in line with the premise of the movie.
Right. It would not have been nearly the funny
But
setup.
that's a good point.
I did also read that when they do that scene at the bar, they had to actually bus in black people into Eugene, Oregon, because the population there was so very white.
Oh, Eugene, Oregon, not back then, there were only many black people.
Was the school in Eugene, Oregon, too?
Yes. I can't remember the name of the school, but what I do remember was that the dean agreed to do it when no dean was going to let them make the movie Animal House at any college because they read the script and they didn't want to have that kind of movie associated with their college. But the dean of whatever the college was.
Oregon, University of Oregon.
Okay, there you go. He agreed to it because he had the opportunity to film The Graduate years before at his other college that he worked at, and he said no because he didn't understand the script for The Graduate. And then The Graduate became a huge popular smash movie, and he regretted it. He's like, I don't understand this script, but I'm just going to say yes. And I think they didn't have the name of the university in the credits at all.
No.
That was like the one rule, but that the university does kind of lean into it, and there's plaques around campus to this day, and they're proud of the fact that this movie was filmed there.
I want to talk also about the final act of this film. First of all, the Bluto having his not only his speech that inspires them, but kind of his failed inspirational speech. I love how he just tries to give the famous coach, "Hey everyone, when the going gets tough, yeah, the tough get going. All right, coach, yay!" But nobody listens to him.
No.
And then finally, when he talks from his own psychotic brain, then he finally goes with them. Because of course it's before internet and synchronized over texting, and everyone has the exact same time on their
Except
digital
Belushi.
phone. But yeah, they all synchronize their watch, and Belushi has a completely different time.
Everybody's
It's
11
fantastic.
o'clock, and Belushi's
Yes.
20 to 6.
Yeah. I used to think that Belushi just had his watch on upside down. That's what I thought as a kid. I thought that was the joke. But no, it's just completely, he has it wrong.
Off time.
It's completely wrong.
But he's impressed with it. And when they all do their little nod of like, yes, this is the right time, he looks at his very, very wrong time and still, once again, with his eyebrows, is like, yes, this is correct.
Yeah, there's a couple Looney Tunes the scenes in this film. I call Looney Tunes film scenes, and at one of them it's so funny, but it's the part where the band is playing that classic bom 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 bom, and character Stork he takes over as band leader, and the band, as if they are just a bunch of bots that they're coded, like they only have one function in the universe, which is to march forward and play their trombones.
And follow the leader.
Right, and follow the leader. The Stork leads them to an alley, and they literally will just keep marching into a wall.
And the trombones break.
Yeah, exactly.
the
The
trombone
trombones are
break.
breaking.
Trombones are breaking.
It's
That's
very
so
funny.
funny.
It's ridiculous, and it shows you, what kind of film this is. You cannot take this part seriously. The last part also has Kevin Bacon, who literally gets flattened into
Yes, right.
sidewalk. I thought that, along with the horse freezing as a kid, I always thought that was Looney Tunes like, but the band joke always got me, and I always think of Animal House whenever I hear any kind of college band.
Well, it's also just the fact that nobody notices that Stork, shoves the other band leader away. It's that nobody notices when I think it's Boone is like tying the chain to the
around
electric pole, and then ties it over to the float. Like, clearly somebody would have seen this, somebody would have said something. And this scene, to me, I think, does play very, very different in 2024. Watching it now, it does kind of a little bit feel like a terrorist attack. Like, they do horrible things. They drive a car into the grandstand. And yes, these are all bad guys and we hate them. But isn't that attempted vehicular manslaughter, right? Like, wouldn't all of these guys be going to jail?
Absolutely. And Niedermeyer attempts to murder Flounder.
Yes, he fires a live shot.
He puts a bullet in his gun.
Yeah.
And of course, Flounder was going to spray seltzer, which is, a reference to like vaudeville, the silent films of Marx Brothers, the Stooges would do that stuff. And he was about to get shot. But even small things, there was a great test of time thing that maybe even by 1978 was seen as ridiculous. There is a float with the women on it that says, "When better women are made, Faber men will make them." And, that in 1962, I think was trying to be pro-women. Like, I think it's trying to go, yes, we're a college, this is a co-educational college, and we make tomorrow's women, and you know what? The men will make them great. Like, oh, guys, you almost had it. But Belushi captures one of the women, Babs, like a caveman, the equivalent of knocking her on the head and dragging her into the car. Of course, the next scene, she has her arms around him and she's absolutely in love. That's the final shot of the film.
And Bluto at the end of the movie is now Senator Blutarsky.
Right.
He went from a drunken, crazy guy to a senator.
Right.
Which isn't that far off.
It's interesting you say that, Rich, and the way you say it there is not far off, because today I think, maybe, Blutarsky becomes a U.S. senator, like judging
Santos.
by George Santos, one of many characters that pretty much could have come out of one of these Animal House-esque things that now I look at it, maybe the writers were going, look at this guy, he becomes a senator. But something of that, the final part of this film, which I believe is playing a riff on things like American Graffiti and epilogues that were very serious, and he goes to Vietnam and he doesn't make it home. And this film shows, ridiculousness. I love the riff they play on Kate and Boone. They get married. It's a love story. Oh, wait, it's not a love story. They get divorced. Right. But also the fact that it says things like Robert Hoover 63 and Lawrence Kroger 66, doesn't that imply, Al, that they were in fact given one more chance?
Yes, I think 1,000%. The implication is that they are all able to go back into Faber. How, I really don't understand, because all of these guys would have been arrested. Everyone knows that it's them. And I think also the fact that the text shows you that Bluto marries Mandy Pepperidge, I think that is also meant to retroactively make all of the creepy stuff that he does earlier in the movie, air quotes, okay. It's okay that he was looking up her skirt under the bleachers. It's okay that he was staring at her undress through the window, because they end up married. And I'm not saying that that is true. I'm not saying that's actual logic. That doesn't really make it okay. But I think that's what they were going for.
Right, that's how Dad met Mom years ago, our crazy love story of how we met.
Oh, but speaking of that, that was also one other thing that I never understood as a kid. And I think I asked you probably when I was a teenager watching this movie with you, Dad, when Mandy's looking out the window and she's topless and Bluto is right fucking there. I'm sure I said, how doesn't she see him? And I'm pretty sure the answer you gave me was,
I had no idea.
Oh, right. I'll tell you exactly why she can't see him. When the lights are all on and it's dark outside, you will not see outside. She's using the window as a mirror.
That's true, because she's taking off her bra and everything, and like she's gazing into the mirror.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is, Al. I think that's
agree.
what it is. She has no idea that Bluto's looking at her.
All right, fair. Well, We've reached the point now where we should ask if the movie stands the test of time. Paul, why don't you go first? What do you think about Animal House? Does the movie stand up?
To me, it keeps getting better. More and more to laugh about. I identify with it more and more. It's just so much fun. I can't wait to see it again. So classic, so wonderful. Stand the test of time, absolutely does.
Okay. All right. Dad, what do you think?
I agree with Paul. I love watching the movie over and over again, much to Molly's chagrin. And it's just so well done. And you think about the shoestring budget that they did it on.
Yeah.
And it was such a huge success, and it still plays very well now. So I think it absolutely stands the test of time.
Great. James, what do you think?
You know, like I said, I grew up with this film from my dad, and this film has the 60s in it. Dad was, and he mentioned it, he was in the Vietnam War. He was a combat surgeon. So, you have the Niedermeyer stuff. There are a lot of straight up, very funny jokes in this film. Donald Sutherland has very small parts in this film, but even his little lecture on Milton and how boring it is, it's very funny. I love these things. The cafeteria, just the stuffing his face and the zit, all these things are mostly innocent antics and very funny. You know, of course, the Omegas are the bad guys. Of course, Dean Wormer's a bad guy. But this film is not called The Good Guy House. You are not supposed to emulate a lot of things that these characters do. You know, things that we were talking about today, Al, we wouldn't do any of those things even in the 90s when we were in fraternities. We knew those things that the Deltas did. Some of the things were terrible. But it was the idea of going against the man and doing pranks that are mostly innocent. Most of these pranks are innocent that they did. And when you look at it at that lens, that it's okay not to think that just because these people aren't all good people, that the movie itself, what it's going for, and most importantly, that a lot of this film is funny. I think definitely knowing that parts of it are bad guys, and you don't have to root for everyone, and just because they're a senator at the end, that doesn't mean that it's almost showing maybe they're not good eggs here. But this film, to me, it does stand the test of time. It's a classic, it's a comedy, and yes, I think it's very easy to see the things that it's going for, that you shouldn't be looking up to. What do you think, Al? 1978's Animal House.
I think asking if this movie stands the test of time is quite frankly a futile and stupid gesture. I knew you would like that one, Dad.
That is great.
I did that for you. Of course, this movie stands the test of time. This is a classic. This is a movie that I have seen so many times. And you know what, Dad? A thought occurred to me the other day while I was watching the movie. I think that may have been the first time in my life I have ever watched Animal House without you, that I watched it solo. And so it honestly did feel a little bit weird watching it not with
Without
you.
me.
Yeah, it really did. Just because that's my association with the movie. And I will always forever have that association of sitting on the couch with you and watching the movie and reading the Spanish subtitles. So yes, I have a deep personal bias here, but I do think that this movie is very, very funny. There are a couple of little things that don't stand the test of time. One thing that kind of leapt out at me was when they're hanging out with Jennings, the Donald Sutherland professor, and he is so paranoid about smoking pot. He locks the door, he closes the shades, and it's like, if you haven't been in New York City in a while, everyone's smoking pot literally everywhere at all times in all places. Nobody gives a shit anymore. So that's kind of funny. It is also a little inappropriate that the professor's hanging out with the kids in this very casual way. I think that was probably inappropriate then, inappropriate now. Not because of the pot, just because there should be some kind of line. But whatever. The movie is really, really funny. I think the script is brilliant. When Greg and Mandy are on the that cliff and they're making out, the fact that he can't get it up is really, really funny. Then she takes off the gloves and it gets so much funnier. Like, you know, there's a lot of that kind of humor where it's already funny and then they just make it extra hilarious. So yes, of course, this movie stands the test of time. Of course. I'm not at all surprised that the four of us all said that, by the way.
Are they implying that he's gay or that he just has some kind of erectile dysfunction?
That thought crossed my mind. Short answer is maybe. Maybe he's gay. Maybe he's asexual. That could also be that he's just not interested in men or women or sex or anything. I don't know if that was a thing people talked about in 1978 or 1962. I have no idea. But honestly, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter because he's trying so hard. He wants to do this thing and he just can't.
He can't. So, Al, I mentioned it earlier in the podcast. We are going to be interviewing a member of the Animal House cinematic universe. Actually, two people we're going to be talking about as a bonus. The first person that we're going to be talking to, it's actually one of those cameos that I purchased for my father. Actor Mark Metcalf. He's the actor that played Doug Niedermeyer. I asked if he could just say hi to my dad and then actually wish him a happy Hanukkah. This is a Hanukkah gift a little while back. And,
That's great.
And yeah, it was a lot of fun. Mark Metcalf, thank you so much if you're listening to this podcast, but you went above and beyond. And all you need to know before listening to this is that my dad, when he was a combat surgeon in Vietnam, his little area, it was nicknamed Hooch 8. But Al, I'd love for you to play this right now.
Dr. Paul Brief. My name is Mark Metcalf. I've resurrected the character Niedermeyer a couple of times in a series of music videos for a band called Twisted Sister, and in a movie called with John Landis, again, who directed Animal House, called The Stupids. I played a colonel. Now, because Niedermeyer, according to the end of the movie, was killed in Vietnam by his own troops, I had to create a backstory. My backstory is that he survived, swam upriver, stayed some time with Kurtz from Apocalypse Now in Cambodia, and then built a raft and paddled across the ocean, re-enlisted and made it up to colonel again, and therefore he was able to be a rogue colonel in the movie called The Stupids. And now I know how to add to that story, because if Niedermeyer had been in Hooch 8 in Vietnam, he would have been saved, possibly by you, Doctor. So thank you for saving my life and for adding to my narrative.
Very cool. Very cool.
So, yes, so my dad is now part of the Animal House cinematic universe.
Very cool. Good job, Paul. That is amazing. Although, I mean, then he was kind of harassing Twisted Sister, so maybe you should have let him die. No, you can't do that. You're a doctor. Well, thank you so much, Dad, and thank you, Paul, for joining us for this episode. This was really amazing.
It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed every minute of it. And I want to thank you.
Of course.
For inviting me.
It was very nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Maybe we can do another one of these. Maybe next year for Father's Day, we can do another movie. Maybe we'll do The Stupids.
With Niedermeyer, possibly. Well, this was a lot of fun. Thanks a lot, Rich.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
We enjoyed it.
Thank you, Dad. Thank you, Paul. Happy Father's Day. That's going to do it for us this week. Next week, we're going to be talking about Chinatown. It's celebrating its 50th anniversary. I haven't seen this movie in ages. James, have you ever seen Chinatown?
Nope. I don't know anything about it except that it's Jack Nicholson.
Jack Nicholson has stitches in his nose.
Yes, it is a classic movie, young Jack Nicholson. I hope you'll like it. I hope I like it. But I'm looking forward to watching that next week. Until then, we want to hear from you guys, the listeners. We are at Test of Time Pod on Facebook, X, Instagram, and Threads. Send us your favorite fraternity stories, your favorite Animal House stories, your favorite stories from the 70s, the 60s, whatever. We love hearing from you. And we'll see you next time, everybody.
Bye.
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 Dad, the podcast is over.
What?
The podcast is over.
I know.
Dad, I'm setting you up. It's over.
Over? It's not over till we say it's over.
Thank you. I was giving you the low ball over the plate there.